Hello. Thought I'd pop on and see whether a Saturday evening is, if there's people around or not. I'll answer a couple of questions if anyone has any. I've never done a Q&A or a live like this at the weekend because I always just assume that everybody's busy, but I thought I'd give it a try. Say hi if you're there so I can see if anyone's there, and if you've got any questions, let me know. Let me know. Where's my little question box gone? Maybe we go and get the iPad so I can see if anybody comments, because it's not showing me on here, darling. I know it's dead. So say hi if you're there, because it'll be able to see if the comments pop up or not. But I just thought I would pop on and see if anyone's got any questions for me. So if you have a question, let me know. Is it charged? I'm just getting the iPad so I can... I'm using a piece of software that doesn't seem to show me at the moment who is there. So I'm just going to get the iPad up. How are we all? Oh, there we go. It's popped up. Hi, Jackie.
We've had comments.
How was your radio show today?
Wait there, Mum. It's. I think Dad's made an update or something, so it's like taking.
Okay, that's fine. Doesn't need to be on there. Has anyone got any questions for me on this Saturday evening? Oh, yeah. Very tired girl here. Oh, yeah. Let's try and share it. I lost the news. How did you lose the news? That's so funny.
What do you mean?
Jackie on a radio show, she said she lost the news today.
What?
Oh, well, you've done it now, so at least you know the world doesn't fall in. The ground doesn't swallow you up when you lose the news. I'm just sharing this elsewhere to see if we have anyone around and if anyone's got any questions for me. Share it in there. Share. Where else shall I share it?
Everywhere.
Share it in there. I believe you. Okay. So, hi Kay. So, I'm just going to hang on for a bit and see if anyone's got any questions for me.
It's delayed.
Is it a little bit delayed, darling? Yeah, let me know if you've got any questions at all.
That's cool.
Why? Because I can see myself on there. Watching myself on there. Double trouble. Here comes the cat.
Can you see her? She's right here. Where?
Yeah, I thought I'd just basically hop on a Saturday whilst I was sat watching TV, just out of interest to see if many people are around on a weekend, because I've not done a Q&A over the weekend before. Oh my word, can you move, cat, please? We don't want to see your bum hole, thank you very much.
Look at the screen in a minute. Look at the screen.
I know.
Mummy, look, here.
Bit delayed, isn't it?
1 second.
So it looks like there are a few people on. Oh yeah, so there are a few people on, but don't seem to have any questions. Hi, Stephen.
Do you have any questions?
But if anyone has anything to ask, please give me a shout.
You have 9 people watching.
Hi, Jade. Also, give it a share if you're able to share, because we have more people. First time watcher. Oh, welcome, Stephen. It's a bit of an unusual time for me to be doing this. I don't normally do it on a weekend because it can be quite quiet But I always say to people, if you share the post, we might get more people to watch and ask questions. But we'll see. We may get some questions.
Ask a question.
I'm just trying to remember. I was asked a couple of questions on email today from some of my group members. I have a private coaching group, and I was just trying to remember off the top of my head what they asked about, because that maybe would help some of you. One of the biggest things, actually, I'll just share one of the biggest things that I find with any of my clients or my coaching clients, people that I work with, whether it be on my courses. Hi, Catherine. The biggest, most common thing that I see. Can I explain what I do? Yes. What I do, Stephen, is I am a trained psychotherapist, but I don't do therapy anymore. I work as a coach, and the reason I work as a coach is because I've worked with lots of people over the years. I also suffered with anxiety myself, and then I came across something called the 3 principles, which just completely changed everything for me, like nothing ever had before. And in a way, what changed was I'm not saying I don't get anxious, because I do, because I'm human, but what I certainly don't have anymore that I used to have is I don't wake up. I don't wake up, feel anxious and then panic about it, because it's often a spiral, and when people feel like they've got severe anxiety, it's usually just the fear of anxiety that it becomes about, rather than anything particular. It's about the fear of losing control, the fear of getting worse, all of that sort of stuff, and that's the bit that I don't have anymore. So I might feel a bit anxious, but I don't, it doesn't affect my life, and it doesn't particularly bother me. So I now just teach other people the principles, and to help and support other people who are stressed. I work with children, I work with teens, I work with schools, I work with adults, in anxiety, depression, building self-esteem. I work with couples, you name it, I do it, because ultimately it all works in the same way. I love watching you, as you are so natural and just like me. I can relate totally with you. Good, that's nice, thank you. Hello, first time watcher. Hi, George. What's your take on grounding? Okay, so grounding for me is a bit of a word that's thrown about, that's kind of like when we're off balance or when we're overwhelmed, it's almost like, well, what's the opposite that we need? We need to become grounded. And I don't use any techniques to become grounded, because in a way it's us that are knocking ourselves off that grounding in the first place. So if we learn more about how and why that's happened, then we don't end up in that same place as often. Now, we will all at times throughout the day, every single day, have moments where we don't feel as grounded, where maybe our mind is really busy and we're just a little bit off balance. But again, as I was just saying a minute ago about the anxiety, I don't worry if I don't believe myself to be grounded in any moment. I just see it as I'm just not as present as I was maybe an hour before. But I don't see it as like a scary thing, if that makes sense anymore. So it's like most things, meditation, relaxation, grounding techniques, all of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. And if it works for you for a time, then that's great. But I really think that the most beneficial thing is for people to understand what gets us to that feeling of being off balance in the first place, because that then, it's almost like, even if we're off balance and we're not feeling that grounded and we're not that present, it doesn't become this vicious cycle of, oh, why am I not present? And this is really difficult, and I must practice my grounding techniques 3 times a day in order to get better. It's not about that for me now. It's more, it just happens very naturally, because as human beings, we are naturally able to ground ourselves quite easily. But when we feel like we're off balance quite a lot, it's because our thoughts are taking us away from the present, and we're kind of, just a minute, darling, and we are believing ourselves not to be okay, really. And depression, anxiety. Okay, Stephen, so I think you said that you were a first time watcher tonight. There's a video, if you go on my website, or I think it might be pinned to one of the posts on this page, there is a half-hour video that if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll be sent it automatically, and it explains the 3 principles that I'm talking about that work really, really well for depression and anxiety. So feel free to have a look at that. Or if you have any problems finding it, just send me a message and I'll send you the link. But yeah, it's, you know, anxiety is not just a feeling that happens. It's not just something that almost happens to us. It's not an illness as such. It's we get feelings of anxiety through lots of anxious thinking. We feel depressed when we've had lots of depressive thoughts, and often anxiety and depression will come hand in hand, because when someone has spent a lot of time feeling anxious, for example, and they feel like it's starting to take over their life and it's stopping them from living how they want to live, then that can be draining and exhausting. And then we can start to have lots of quite depressed, low thoughts about that, like, oh, how long does this have to last for? This has gone on for far too long. And then they all will materialise in you feeling quite low and fed up, because you've got lots of low and pissed off thoughts, basically. How do you explain to friends and family about anxiety and depression? Well, it depends what you mean. If you mean to explain how you're feeling, then I would kind of not question, but sort of ask, do you need them to understand? Because if you think about it, it's okay to want support and to talk to people, but sometimes we can talk about it too much, if that makes sense. There's a line that cross where it could become everything, every conversation that we have, and that's then again just creating more anxious thinking. And sometimes I think when we feel anxious, we feel obliged, like we've got to try and get people around us to understand, and yet we don't really understand it ourselves. So, and again, that's hard work, and that creates more anxious thinking. So, you don't always have to have them understand. All you really need for support and help is for someone to be alongside you and be loving and be compassionate. You don't necessarily need them to understand. I think there's a video on my YouTube account about that very thing. I think as well, Catherine, I'm sure you've got my manual off the top of my head. I can't remember, but if you have, there's a section in the back which is leave overwhelm and it will pass. And that's all about how to help and support others as well. So if you've got it, have a read of that bit. It talks a little bit about listening and validation and helping the people explore when they've got these feelings. But ultimately, no one can change anything for you. It's more about your own understanding. You can't, sometimes it's too hard to tell family. And again, same with you, Stephen, it's kind of like, if you feel you want to talk, but don't feel like you have to explain yourself to people, because it is what it is. And some people will never understand. Some people will never, don't want to understand, don't want to listen. And part of the reason is not because they don't care, but sometimes they find it scary. Like, I can remember at times feeling so anxious, and then people around me, they wouldn't get cross with me, but you could almost sense the agitation. And again, it's not because they're irritated, but it's because there's fear there. It's like, what do we do to help and fix this, people? And again, there's nothing that they can do to fix us. So here we go, George. So cognitive behavioural therapy would be the go-to for anxiety and depression for life-changing results. In my opinion, no. And I'll tell you why. As soon as I talk about thoughts, people go to the idea of CBT. It might work for some people, but I have worked with a lot of people as a psychotherapist who've been for CBT. It's maybe worked for a short period of time, and then it's like they've had a setback and it's no longer helpful. And just before I carry on saying this, like, this isn't for me to say you should do this or you should do that. It's really down to the individual, and you do what feels right for you. And sometimes it's trial and error of different things of what you find works for you. But I spent 10 good years investigating all of this and trying all of this, including training as a psychotherapist. So I'm pretty kind of experienced in a number of different areas, whether that be trained as a therapist or having explored them as a client. And because CBT is so widely known in the sense that, hi Eric, that it's what the NHS prescribe to people, just it's like the go-to. So it's almost like everybody's heard of it. And everybody links it to this idea that it's about controlling and managing thoughts. But where CBT is different to what I'm talking about is that part of what I help people understand and help people explore is the idea that we can't actually control our thoughts. Whereas if you're doing CBT, it might be about techniques of, how do you control your thoughts? How do you change them around, reframe them, all that sort of stuff. When actually the biggest amount of freedom I got was from realising I can't control my thoughts. I can have the most random thoughts at the most random of times and do nothing about that. It's almost like when we go to sleep and have a dream, you might have dreams about all sorts of random things, and yet you wake up and it's almost like, oh, it's just a dream, and then you carry on with your day and you don't think too much about it. It's kind of the same in the day. Random thoughts can pop into our head at any time that we think, where's that come from? Or, we don't know, but we can't control that because that is how our mind works. That's how human nature works. But what we can do is the more we understand how this works, the difficulty comes in and the problem comes in for people is when they layer thoughts on top of each other. So have a thought, I don't know, let's just say, for example, I might have a thought one day of, oh, I'm a terrible parent. Okay. Then that will feel uncomfortable. That comes and I feel a little bit of discomfort with that. And then I've got choices then. I either let that discomfort pass and the thought pass, or I start to question why I've had the thought, what does that mean? Then I try and think of, right, let me think of times when I have been a bad parent. Let me try and think of times when I've been good so I can counteract that. And it's holding on to the thought, trying to figure out, work it all out. And we don't actually need to believe the thoughts that we have, and that's the difference. We can't control thoughts. And hi, Vicky. And so some people who go for CBT believe it's about them. They believe it's about how they learn to manage and control thoughts. But they will be learning and managing that for a lifetime because we can't control thoughts. And in a way, the way I got peace of mind is by realising I couldn't, because often I spent so much time trying to control thoughts, trying to control the situation, trying to fix, trying to work out why I felt the way I felt, trying to massively overcomplicate it all. And it was when I started to simplify it and see it for what it really is and realise I actually had the power to believe or not believe thoughts, and that thoughts weren't truths, thoughts were just thoughts. And that's what made a huge difference. The most difficult thing about the inside out is how easy it is. We need to get this out there. It saved my life. Farah, yes, you're right. And sometimes if people say to me, oh, explain what it is, I'm getting better at it now because I've done it a fair few times. But again, it's almost so simplistic that it's difficult to explain. So for example, in my private coaching group, there's not like loads of things for them to learn. There's not loads of exercises for them to do. But what there is I do a coaching call every week and I'll answer their questions and their concerns. And they just learn from that gradually as we go along. And there's nothing for them to do at the end of the call. There's nothing for them to change or fix. It's just hearing it. And it was only even last night, one of the girls was saying in the comments, because there's some people who were newer there and some people have been there a lot longer, was actually saying that things are just changing and she didn't know why, but she didn't really have to do anything for that to happen. So it's just, again, that learning. Thank you, Naya. My daughter's... Okay, that's okay, thank you. So yeah, it can feel difficult to explain, but actually it doesn't even really need explaining. It just needs for people to be open-minded, be interested in the idea that there might be another way of dealing with things, and just to be interested, really. It's like being an explorer of your own life. For example, when I trained as a psychotherapist, I had lots of set ideas and beliefs of how things worked, how if someone was anxious, what happened, why, all of this. And I had set boxes that I'd ticked. I'd learned a lot of theory. I'd learned a lot of stuff. And so when I first started to hear about these 3 principles and the idea of the inside out nature of human nature, a hard thing for me was trying not to overcomplicate it. So I'd think, oh, and maybe this is why, and this is why. And it took me a while to be able to, I was going to say be open-minded. It wasn't really about being open-minded because I've always been open-minded. But there's different levels of open-mindedness for me. So for me, it was kind of like, yeah, I'm open-minded to something new. But when I was listening, I was in my head going, oh, maybe that's because of this. And maybe I wasn't really listening initially. And that's sometimes the hard part as well. I learn if you worry about it, it makes you worse. So I try and don't think about it. Okay. And the biggest key there, and what I always say to my group members is, as soon as they say, I try this or I try to do that, that's the thing. You don't need to try. The way human nature works is we have thoughts, and thoughts are so transient and pass so quickly that we don't need to try. But we're always telling ourselves we need to try, we need to do better, we need to fix ourselves, we need to work this out, we need to figure it out. And again, people that will work with me on my courses or in my group can be frustrated at first, because it's kind of like, yeah, but what do I do now? And they want me to like quickly say, right, do these 5 things and you'll feel better. And it doesn't work like that. Let's have a look. I went to get help with a mental health group and it had nothing. When I tried to tell the woman, she told me to be quiet. Not very compassionate, is it? Stephen, I will PM you the link. Stephen, I might end up forgetting when I come off because I do have a bit of a potty brain. So if I do forget, I'll try and remember. If I do forget, just PM me and I will send it back to you. Could you hypnotise me and let the inside voice out? I do actually do hypnotherapy. But again, you know, I trained in hypnotherapy, I'm trained as a psychotherapist. It's only when we start to have insights for ourselves and start to really see how this works that things start to settle. And when we realise it's not as complicated as we sometimes think it is. And the lovely lady up here who said the 3 principles changed her life, and we need to get it out there. Oh, there it is. And the fact that it's so easy, but that's the difficult thing, because people resist it all the time. So it can't be that straightforward. And believe you me, I believed the same in the beginning. I thought I cannot have spent 10 years of my life looking for something to fix myself, having tried absolutely everything. To me, it was then like, it can't be this simple. And part of that was annoyance in like, don't tell me I've wasted all that time and money. You know, almost frustration as well, but it is a lot more simple than we think. Thank you very much. I need all the help I can to beat this illness. Okay. Again, I know it feels difficult when you're in a situation where you feel so overwhelmed with anxiety or depression or both. But it's not an illness. You might feel symptoms, you might be symptomatic because your overthinking is in overdrive, and then you start to feel anxious or you feel low and you feel depressed, and then we can then label it as like this illness. But an illness implies, you know, if we've got a cold or a flu, it's like, well, we have to just, you know, put up with it and we just need medication for it to go away. But this is something that we're creating internally in our heads. How many voices is normal? Well, it depends on the day of the week and how the weather is. And there's a really good podcast. I listened to it a long, long time ago, Eric, so I don't know. I could probably search it out. Of somebody actually that was diagnosed with schizophrenia, who learned about these principles and had tons of voices in his head. And this really helped him because, again, the voices in their head, they're still thoughts, aren't they? They might have a different ring to them, a different sound to them. Their thoughts still just the same. And most of us have lots of different thoughts and voices going through our heads day in, day out. Has anyone got any questions whilst I'm here? And I know I ask all the time, but if anyone doesn't mind giving the video a share, because the idea is I'm going to do this every week, maybe twice a week, once a week, twice a week, depending on what I've got on. And so the more people that come on the videos, the better. Because the more questions we've got, the more we learn together. You're sniffling away, darling. A bit sniffly, aren't you? So I'll just wait and see if anyone's got any questions. Pass me that iPad while I just... I'm just going to find out where that video is for you. If you go... In fact, I'll just put my web address on here now. The website is under construction at the moment. I'm changing it around quite a bit to make it a bit easier to navigate. But anyone that hasn't watched the video that I've mentioned that wants to, it's now in the comments, my website. And if you just where it'll say a gift for you of sending you a video, just pop your email in there and it'll go straight to your inbox. Oh, thanks, Stephen. That's lovely to say. I've only got the one child who's here, and she's pretty well up on all this stuff, aren't you? If all my videos go on YouTube, and you'll see the other ones, you were answering the questions last time, weren't you? This is the thing.
Watch it.
The other thing is, I had people not so long ago. I posted. It was a picture. We were walking down the canal, weren't we? And you know, like when you get the rippled bit of stones in the middle, where it gets a bit, I don't know, a bit more chaotic, I suppose, the water. And we're walking past, and my daughter Maya said, "Oh, look, Mum, that's like thought. When you describe thought, that it's settled and calm, and then it gets all crazy, but it always settles again afterwards." It was a really lovely analogy that she picked up on, because she has insights and she sees things around her, because it's something that I talk about a lot, and it's just a general part of our day-to-day life. It's how we explain things, because we experience everything through our thoughts. So to me, everything we're experiencing day to day, when we talk about it, we always bring in this idea of thought. And I actually put a post, sorry, I've just got things coming through. I put a post up explaining.
That's the last one that I did.
The last one that you did, yeah. I put a post up that to say that, and like a little image. I took a picture of the water where she described it, and the amount of people that commented saying that I was full of shit, excuse my language, and that there's no way an 11-year-old has said that, and don't be so ridiculous, and basically saying I was making it up. Like, why would I make it up? I didn't need to say it was her that said it, but it was her that said it. And that's the thing, like, it doesn't actually bother me, but what, I suppose not, I don't know if sad's the right word, but what that makes me think is, like, why do we not believe that an 11-year-old can understand, like, a really basic concept? Like, it's not a really complicated thing to see, but because as we get older and our conditioned beliefs become really solid often in our heads, you know, one of which is that this all has to be really complicated and difficult, and it doesn't. And I see it all the time with children that I work with who get this way quicker than most adults get it. And they get it because it's simple, and because they're not so stuck in those conditioned beliefs as we are. So it amazes me really when people are, "Oh, there's no way she said that." Well, why wouldn't she? She didn't have to use big words to say it. It wasn't like, it was just there, glaringly obvious. It's something we talk about, and it's not rocket science. Yes, she's right. Why do we have so many questions? I don't know. You ask very cryptic questions, don't you, Eric? It's not rocket science. No, it's not. And the other thing, she's just started secondary school this year. She's obviously coming to the end of it in some of her first year, but I was just saying not long ago with my husband, like, the amount that she's learned in this first year, like, she's started to speak, she started to learn French, she's learned loads of stuff in geography, maths, the reading Shakespeare, like, the amount of stuff. Don't be sorry, I'm just meaning it in a nice way. She's learned so much, and people say it's just so amazing what she's learned. And again, we really discredit, like, their capabilities. Like, she's learning another language, another two actually. All these things, like, why would it be so difficult to pick up some basic concepts around thought? Don't be sorry, Eric. Don't ever be sorry. I don't understand myself. Neither do I sometimes. That's the thing, isn't it? That's part of the problem for most of us. It's like we try so hard to understand ourselves, and yet, actually, another thing that makes it a bit easier is to just start to think, do you know what? Do I really need to understand myself? I just accept myself rather than trying to understand myself. And that's another key thing, just accepting how we are. So, again, another person tonight was posting, "Hi, Gail." Another person in the private coaching group was talking about something they're nervous about next week. And one of the things that I eventually was saying is, maybe you just have to accept until that event is over. You're going to have anxious thinking about it, and you're going to feel shitty about it. And because the more we accept it, the easier it becomes. It doesn't mean the anxiety and the anxious thoughts will go away completely, But if we try and get rid of them and want them to be gone completely, but yet we have something that we've got lots of anxious thoughts about, then we're asking for the impossible, really. And again, I think someone that's there, anyone else that's got this manual, if you've not read it, yeah, it is, Gail. Acceptance is definitely key. Then have a read in the manual. Oh yeah, I'll show you in a sec. Have a read of the manual. I'm trying to think which bit it is now. It's about acceptance. Yeah, that's the picture that's the poster, didn't we? It was Maya when she was pointing to it and that people did not believe.
But I did.
I know you did, darling. Accept the things we cannot change, yes. And accept ourselves for who we are, warts and all. So, yeah. So I've popped my web address on there for anyone who wants to get the video to download. And then if anyone's got any questions, just give me a shout. Yeah. And as I say, I would love it if you would share the video for me. Oh, yeah, she's just pointed it out on there. We won't show the person's name. Actually, he wasn't very nice, was he, that man? He's actually put on the comment of Maya's post. What did he put?
Did about the canal.
Yeah, he put, fuck off, she definitely never said that.
I did.
You did. But then there was lots of lovely people. And there's another one, I don't want to be cynical, but would an 11-year-old have said that? It's like, how is that so hard to believe? Oh, let's have a look. Lee, hi Lee, always worrying and catastrophising, help. Okay, so overthinking is a massive habit, and it's a habit that we can change. And overthinking, habitual overthinking, creates lots of feelings, and then we can then go on to overthinking those as well. It's a spiral. So if you haven't watched my half-an-hour video from my website, go on there. If you sign up for the newsletter link, it'll just send it out to you. So Sarah says, overthinking causes anxiety. If you can stop that, then that's key. Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. I never realised for a long, long time. I used to think it was just a feeling that I got that I didn't like and I wanted rid of. And I never would have had myself down as even as an overthinker. But I have since realised that I was massively an overthinker. That was like my addiction. So if I had any problem to solve, if I had any worries, any stress, I would go into massive overdrive of trying to figure it all out, try and predict the future, try and plan for every eventuality that might ever happen, which was very, very pointless and caused a lot of stress. So yeah. Okay, so if anyone wants to watch that video, I've put the web address on there. Thoughts control feelings. Yes, they do. Thoughts create feelings. And it can be a bit of a cycle because then we have feelings and then we have physical symptoms and then people overthink those and it goes round and around and around and around, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Sarah. That is the key. Went for an eye test today and got very uncomfortable with, I think going for any kind of test, going to the doctors, I hate going to the dentist, even if I'm going for a checkup and I know they're not going to be doing anything specific, I still don't like going. And so if we've got anxious thinking about it and worried thoughts about it, it can make us feel weird, it can make us feel dizzy, it can make us feel a little bit like, bit sick, yeah, it can make us feel a bit off balance, like, there's so many feelings, symptoms and physical symptoms that can come with worrying and overthinking. And again, so with something like that, in the past I might have gone, oh, well, why did I feel like that today? And I really need to figure out what it is that made me feel like that today and blah, blah, blah. And now I just don't bother because once it's past, it's past. And if we keep going back to it, we're making more of a thing about it. We're starting then to create a habitual idea that if we go for another eye test, for example, and that happens again, it's then we're creating a habit and this idea. And that's how phobias come about. Phobias come about from people having a belief and a conditioned belief and keep believing it. And then they create and decide that they can't be around a certain thing or that they can't do certain things. So, yeah. I hope your eyes were okay, Eric. Have a look. So, yeah. Has anyone got anything else they want to ask before I love you and leave you all? Okay, so yeah, so this was just a bit of an experiment, really, just to see if there are people around on a Saturday, because I usually do this in the week, and yeah, so I'll keep doing them. I think you're ready for bed. We'll keep doing them, and as I say, I would love you to please share, because the more people we get, the more questions we get, the more that we can all learn from each other. No props, Eric. Okay, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.